Hello, welcome to the If I Were the Devil, the War on Love podcast. I had to move some things around for this podcast, which I'll explain. I was going to be talking about the strategies that the enemy uses to keep us from stepping fully into the plan and purpose that God has for us to step into our full walking in freedom, spirit led self instead of our wounded self. But today I needed to first take a pause out of getting convicted yesterday and just blown away of how much I'm growing from preparing for this podcast, being in scripture, just thinking about all the ways in which the enemy is moving in the world. And it is taking me on an interpersonal journey that I wasn't fully expecting, but definitely not surprised because that is the character of God and different growth seasons that I have had previously. But I was just going about my day yesterday and I felt a deep sense of conviction. And I'm going to encourage everyone that when you feel a sense of conviction, that you pay attention, that you don't avoid it, shut it down, minimize it, distract yourself. So I leaned into that conviction and I started to feel a deep sense of empathy for my mother. So I realized that when I made the podcast episode on how it wasn't a agape love that I grew up with, that it was a broken family system, which is true. And I did not say anything that was untrue. But it occurred to me that as a mom and all the sacrifices that I made as a mother, that it would probably be really hard for her to hear that all the ways in which I was wounded. So it wouldn't be anything new that I had said, or if she would listen to the podcast, everything I said was true based on my experience. And I do believe that I was sharing it from a place of wanting to give encouragement to others about, hey, we can come out of this woundedness into a life of restoration and redemption as I have. And that is all true also. But what hit me yesterday was, gosh, that's only one side of the story. So for the point of that episode, yeah, I was talking about brokenness and woundedness, and this is how the enemy works to use wounded people to pass woundedness to each other. And that absolutely happens. But there's another side to that story. And so I want to step in with this episode today before I get into what I had planned on sharing the strategies of the enemy. But, as I was thinking about how to tie this in, I'm like, well, this absolutely isn't too far of a jump from where I was going anyway. We are here because someone made a sacrifice. There is no self without someone who brought us into the world. I want to start off by giving a trigger warning. I'm going to talk about some really sensitive topics today. So if you start hearing where I'm going, if I were the enemy and a hater of God and the ways in which he is using the sanctity of life to try to keep us from being here, I want you to know my heart here is motivated by love and there's no condemnation in Christ. Who the Son sets free is free indeed. There is no judgment from me, and there may be judgment from the world. If you're a mom and you're listening to this, you are an imperfect human, and the best thing that you can do is to fill up on Jesus and love like him and acknowledge the imperfections that you made as a mother in a humble way and ask for forgiveness in the ways that you need to. Especially if your kids ever come to you and say that they have been hurt by you, the best thing you can do is to humble yourself and to say, you're right, and I'm sorry. Will you please forgive me? Don't go into self-loathing. Don't go into self-justifying. Don't go, oh, yes, I'm such a terrible mother. That's not what they need from you. They need you to hear. They need to know that you hear them and that you are responding to their heart and not making it about you, which is selfish. If you are a child, hopefully no young children are listening to this. It's not a podcast made for children, but if you are an adult, I encourage you to thank your imperfect mom for the sacrifices that she made for you. And it's okay for you to live in holding the tension between the ways in which your mom was imperfect and also because of her saying yes to allowing you to be in this world, you got to live the life that you get to live. I always think it's a great idea for parents, if possible, to, if your kids need, if they're hurt, be willing to support them in therapy. Be willing to even pay for it. If it's, I am a therapist, but I pay for my kids to go to therapy when they're willing to do so, which requires the Lord's humility because that's really hard being a therapist in this town and having my kids meet with another therapist in town because my imperfections are out there, but they're real. And it does no one any good for me to deny them, minimize them. Instead, I say, yeah, my husband and I were going through some really hard times when my kids were little, and that impacted them. Hurt people, but free people. So let's get into this podcast. Please know that I am talking about sensitive things. So I said last time that none of us are as good as we think we are, and also none of us are as bad as we think we are. And this goes for parenting and how we were parented. We cannot step into freedom without stepping into the truth. And I shared my challenges of being raised in a broken world with broken people and the damage that did to me, and all that was true. And as God promised, what the enemy meant for evil, God will use for good, and He has. He has led me to recovery, healing, freedom, restoration in all areas of my life. And however imperfect my life was as a child, God has used everything in my life. And if my life had been ended, this restoration would not have been possible. So to parent is a blessing and a sacrifice. Greater love has no man than this, than a man who would lay down his life for his friends. And parenting requires a sacrifice. Jesus's birth was a sacrifice. It almost cost Mary her fiance, and they had to leave and go to Bethlehem. Moses's mom made a sacrifice to put him in a basket in the river so he was not killed. Baby Jesus's life was threatened to be killed by Herod, and his parents had to run and escape to keep him alive. That's a huge sacrifice. They had to completely change their lives to escape. Moses was spared by his mom's sacrifice because the Egyptian Pharaoh was trying to control the population and was taking the lives of infants to keep the population down. So you're here, I'm here because someone made a sacrifice. Welcome to the war on love. If I were an enemy of God, here's what I'd do. If I were the devil, my first and best approach would be to ensure that God's beloved do not step into a plan or a purpose that He has for them by making it that they couldn't even be a self. I would work hard in the patterns of the world so that the life of a human is optional. Humans will be attacking each other as adults in many ways and in life. Life will be not regarded as sacred, but optional in the kingdom of darkness. I will use the love of money as a motivator to perpetuate my evil plot for children to be born into the world. Pursuit of career growth as more important, and the twisted idea that it is all for freedom of choice. The sanctity of a life of beloved children will be considered an inconvenience or a barrier to the plans some people have for their lives. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear will keep people from wanting to keep a life. And the judgment from others, especially from Christians, parenting from a place of judgment and shame, worried about what other people will say if their child has a teen pregnancy, instead of loving them and having the faith that God will use whatever challenges for the good of those who love Him. This will help to keep many who get filled with a life in their womb out of wedlock from telling the parents. It'll be the shame and the fear. I love when the commandments are optional. To love, optional. Murder, optional. Honoring parents, optional. I love when children disrespect their parents and consider only where their wounded, hurt parents failed them and never give credit where credit is due. I love for a generation of children to just cut out their parents when they feel hurt by their actions, instead of creating healthy, loving boundaries where a heart can be protected. Also, the relationship can be preserved in a way that is safe for both of them. I would use my influence in the dark world to show only perfect parents, to up the dissatisfaction and create envy and jealousy. And then I use this to drive fear in parents raising kids to give in to their kids for whatever they want, to prevent them from ever having to deal with their kids being disappointed or potentially rejecting them. Fear-based parenting keeps them from love-based parenting. I would certainly not want anyone finding their way to grace or mercy or compassion, considering that hurt people, and restitution is hopeless. and the work I'm doing in the world to keep humans from communicating well, they will just have to stay in avoidance instead of restoration. Children trying to communicate how parents hurt them will be met with denial and defense and rationalization. And parents trying to reach out to their kids to take ownership of what they had done to harm them will be met with a wall of unforgiveness and bitterness. We had been talking about identity, and there is no human without an egg and a sperm. I am here because my mother said yes to the blessing and challenge of motherhood. Not all parents do. So, because of me feeling convicted, I am wanting to make this recording to honor my mom. And while I did have a lot of wounds from the ways that I was raised, she still carried me, gave birth to me, and gave me a lot of really great skills and tools in life. And I want to take a few moments to honor her. This is an thank you episode for my mom before we step into what is honor. So, to my mom, thank you for giving me life. I know it requires a sacrifice to be a parent. Thank you for giving me the freedom to explore and learn from my mistakes instead of fixing everything for me, which could have made me dependent on others. Thank you for not sheltering me from the world and how it really is and showing me our need for Jesus while also teaching me not to be naive about the dangers and hurt in the world. Thank you for allowing me to be independent, which helped me build resiliency. Thank you for fostering my deep appreciation for animals and the earth and teaching me to hate littering. Thank you for not using fear-based parenting. You allowed me to wander and explore without excessive fear that would have kept me from trying new things. Thank you for showing me not to hold grudges. Thank you for not spoiling me so I learned the value of hard work and how to make choices about where to spend my time and what is worth my dollar. Thank you for showing me that love is non-judgmental, even with flaws and imperfections. Thank you for showing me that when relationships get hard, you don't leave at the first sign of distress. Thank you for modeling what it means to be an entrepreneur and having a business that allowed for a flexible life. Thank you for showing me how to not become someone just to fit in. Thank you for teaching me to be resourceful by not doing everything for me. Thank you for giving me an appreciation for the country life, trees, and for being outside. Thank you for what you did for me, because without me, there is no Kayla, Kyle, and Dylan, and I am so blessed to be their mom. So what is honoring your mother? What does honor really mean? I come across a lot of clients who have complicated relationships with their mother, or people who have complicated relationships with their daughters or other children. So honor is really important to know what it is and what it's not, because sometimes it gets manipulated. Go figure, right? We live in this fallen world with an enemy who is constantly trying to manipulate truth. So honor at its core means to regard with a great respect, to value highly, and to treat as weighty and significant. So when this applies to honoring our mother or our father, it means to respect their position as the one who gave you life and raised you, gratitude for sacrifice, both seen and unseen, consideration of their wisdom and counsel, even when you disagree, care for their needs when they age. And I want to give a caveat to that. There is some things we're responsible for and some things they're not. And seeking wise counsel and discernment on that, of where your obligation starts and ends, might be wise, because I see people get confused in that. Speaking well of them to others and protecting their dignity, there's a way to tell the truth without dragging someone through the mud. And that is, requires, again, caution and loving like Jesus. Valuing the relationship itself as sacred and worthy of investment. Now, I want to make sure that this is heard loud and clear. Honor is not the same as blind obedience or agreeing with everything a parent does. Even imperfect mothers or fathers deserve honor for their God-given role, though boundaries will be necessary for health and safety. Boundaries are guarding our heart. So when we are in the presence of unsafe people, emotionally unsafe people, people who are talking sarcastically or putting us down or dismissing or devaluing other people that we love and care about, we want to make sure that we're leaving and cleaving, that we're leaving our parent and stepping into this new covenant with a new family. And part of, yes, we can honor our mother and father, but we now are need to be honoring and respecting the two flesh becoming one when we step into a new covenant with our partner. And so it might feel dishonoring to protect your new family, but that is what needs to happen. So we can speak the truth, say what you mean and mean what you say. It doesn't have to be that you say it mean. So learning what honor is and is not as important. But it is important because it is in the 10 commandments. So if we're dishonoring our parents, it is going to create chaos and rebellion in the world. The kids are immature, they don't have the resources. So from 0 to 18, parents have a huge responsibility, and we want to be thankful for them keeping us alive. And but children do need to be reined in. They cannot be running the household, and that is absolutely happening in this world where parents, again, they're operating out of fear or shame or just not having the skills. And there's generational curses there. It's interesting to me that we need to be a certain age to buy tobacco or get a driver's license. And then we have to make sure that we're demonstrating the skills in order to pass a driver's license. And yet anybody can have a child. And that is the right that we have as humans. And yet we can say there are parents in the world who they don't have what a child needs. They're not capable of being a parent. And that's where, in this world, we need to have better systems to support people in their parenting and give them what they need. And of course, it's a very broken world and there's a very broken system. And we're not going to get into all of that. But it does take a lot to raise a healthy child. But even, someone like me growing up with trauma and wounds, it then became my responsibility to step into recovery. It became my responsibility to, get into the kind of help that I needed, whether through free 12-step groups, which took me a long way. And then when I had the resources to get into therapy and do some deeper work that needed to happen. So there's a lot of free resources out there. Overcomers Outreach, free. So there's no excuse for anyone why they can't find their way into getting some help. But it takes humility and it takes acknowledging these wounds and getting out of blame and contempt and resentment to say, okay, this happened, living the serenity prayer, accept what I can't change what I can so that I can do what I can and stop focusing on what I can't. But honor and respect, it also shapes our character. So choosing to honor an imperfect parent refines our humility, forgiveness, grace, and patience within us, which are qualities that we need to be more like Christ. So it models our own submission. Even Jesus, the Son of God, right, submitted to earthly parents. That's in Luke 2:51. So his example shows us that honoring authority isn't about worthiness of the authority figure, it's about obedience to God. Now, there are some parents who are just downright hurtful and harmful, and the best way we can honor them is to pray for them from afar. So I realize that there is also there's a lot of damage done with some parents who are just outright abusive. Maybe they're in active addictions. And so loving them from afar, guarding your heart, having boundaries, that is not dishonoring. That is honoring to say, I'm going to pray from you from afar. But when someone is in active addiction or untreated or unmanaged mental health, they are not safe for themselves. They will not be safe for us. So it is not dishonoring to guard our heart and protect ourselves from further harm while supporting them getting help as best as we could, or they're willing for, and then certainly praying. There's a lot of needs in the world, but what I had to learn is there's a lot of needs in the world, but I cannot solve everybody's problem or meet everybody's needs. I want to pray for the right people to come up, for in the path to be the one maybe to bring help to, to the people. Not always me that is supposed to step into where people need help unless God tells me to. So I'm going to end here before we pick up tomorrow. We will be coming back into the enemy's distorted strategies of how he keeps us from stepping into our spirit-led whole selves, walking in the identity that Christ has for us. I'm going to end here. Just that more strategies of how, when we're honoring our parents, we want to do our part to speak respectfully, to offer forgiveness and extend appropriate kindness. Remember that forgiveness does not necessarily mean that restoration of relationship. Forgiveness means I am releasing that person from the debt they owed to me, from the harm they've done to me. but it doesn't mean that I need to step into back into relationship to forgive. That's important. We can extend appropriate kindness, maintain integrity with our words and actions. So say what do what you say you're going to do, and then don't do what you say you're not going to do. And then pray for the relationship. Release what you cannot control. Your parents' response, willingness to change, their ability to acknowledge harm, whether full reconciliation happens or not. Don't sacrifice yourself. If possible, and as far as it depends on you, create space for boundaries when someone persistently violates peace or safety. And that comes from Romans 12:8. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. It is not always possible to live at peace with everyone. So we can only do our part. And we want to keep a clear conscience. Just like, I was convicted yesterday. I don't want to have a cloudy conscience. I want to be able to be walking completely and totally in freedom. So when you've done your part, you can rest. I do my best and I leave the rest to God, right? Even if the relationship remains broken, knowing you honored God's commandment to pursue peace, that's what we can do. And this is how we can honor boundaries, and it can coexist. To have honor and boundaries can coexist. You honor the role, you pursue peace, and you do your part, and then trust God with the outcome. That was, again, kind of a detour on where I was going, but I got to listen to God. Sorry, guys. So I pray that if there was any sense of emotion that this episode evoked for you, I hope and pray that you take care of your heart, go talk to God, go journal. Maybe if there is some restoration that needs to happen as you were listening to this podcast, I pray that you sit with that and then you be led by the Spirit, maybe seek wise counsel on where to go with that. And you listen to the prompting of the Holy Spirit. That is who we are first and foremost. That is who we are responsible to. God bless. I'll see you for the next episode.